Well, hello everyone. Hello out there. Good, happy Friday to everyone out there. And we're thinking about Magic live stream. And I am one of your hosts, Chris Hernes Faust. This is my partner, Braden Daniels. Braden, what can we expect tonight on the live stream?
Thank you, Chris. Well, we're going to be talking about engagement. Whether you're a magician, a friend of magic, or a business leader, engagement matters. And we're going to be talking about all things engagement and how can we engage our audiences. And to do that, at first, we're going to ask you where you're tuning in from. So put in the chat, where are you streaming from? Put in the state and the city and let us know. We want to hear from you.
Well, I already see Jeff McBride out there. Hello, Jeff. It's a pleasure having you. And it's also exciting for us to be here on Thinking About Magic live stream. So I do see a couple people out there watching, Braden. So if you guys are out there, please let us know where you guys are coming from. It's always good to know where everyone's tuning in from. And let me check the comments here, Braden. It seems like it's Jonas Cain, and he's in the green room, and he says, "Good to see you, Jeff, as well." Heather Meadows just turned in, and she just tuned in. Hello to you, and I could see Jonas, Massachusetts, and also from Dallas, Texas. Braden, I think you know where this is about right here.
Confetti Eddie, absolutely, that's wonderful. Thank you for joining. Appreciate that.
And I think Jeff is tuning in from Las Vegas at the Magic and Mystery School.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, here we are, here to talk about engagement. And Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Conversation is the laboratory and the workshop of the student." Conversation is the laboratory and the workshop of the student. And that's what we're here to do today. But right before we jump into that, I just want to acknowledge our friend, your friend, Chris Herren as Faust. He will be competing in a qualifier in the North American FISM qualifying match, which will actually get him into potentially being on Team USA. So let's hear it for Chris and wish him all the best on his competition.
Well, thank you very much, Braden. The best I could do, what Jeff always says, just sing your song, and that's what I plan to do when I go out there, is just do what I do best, and hopefully people are entertained. But thank you so much for that.
We love the heart. We love the meaning that you put into your magic, Chris, and you've been really entertaining people all year, this last 2 years, in a really strange situation. You've taken your act and you've come online and you've helped countless people get through an evening and entertain them. So we thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Braden.
All right. Well, we will introduce our panelists. First up, we have Napoleon Ryan. Napoleon is an actor and magician from London. Napoleon moved to North America in 2010 and is now based out of Los Angeles. Everyone welcome Napoleon Ryan.
Hi, guys. Hello.
Hey, Napoleon. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And now we will introduce our next panelist. Jonas Cain is an author, speaker, and magician who helps individuals, teams, and organizations excel in community engagement, leadership development, and change management. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Jonas Cain.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here. Good to see all of you.
Welcome Jonas.
All right, we're going to kick this topic off with one big question. What does engagement mean? Now, Merriam-Webster may say it means to hold the attention of. To hold the attention of what? Our imagination? What say you? Jonas, what's your definition of engagement?
Oh, do we have about an hour? Because I could go for about an hour a day on this topic. But to give you a short answer, yes, my definition of engagement includes attention. I have 3 keys of engagement that I work with. And key number 1 is attention, because we could have something wonderful to share. There could be the possibility for beautiful relationship, whatever that might look like in business or in life. But if we don't have their attention, it's not going to matter. So attention, very important for engagement.
Napoleon, what say you? What's your definition of engagement?
Depends on the audience. If it's an audience of children, keep them sat down for an hour, more or less. If it's an audience of adults, well, keep them sat down for an hour, probably. It's the same thing. But I think, it's slightly different depending on who you're performing to. But I mean, you want them to be enjoying what you're doing. I think that's the main thing, or at least interested in it.
Yeah.
Now, Fitzke, actually Buckley, Arthur Buckley, in Principles and Deceptions, and this is a book, if you're a magician, you really need to take a look at. In here, he states, securing favorable attention at the outset of a performance is the basis of every good act that has appeared publicly. Securing favorable attention at the outset is a hallmark of every great act. And we'll go back to what Jonas had said about attention. And he positions that there's favorable attention and there's unfavorable attention. And you want to get favorable attention. So what are your guys' thoughts on this? Is all attention equal?
Well, the first thing, if I may, the first thing that came to mind was that idea, no publicity is bad publicity, which I think in this case of in a performance setting, I don't think that holds true, because you could get someone's attention on stage in a very negative way and no one will want to engage with you. If you're telling humor that's off-putting or not appropriate for the audience or for the venue, or you're doing material that just is not appropriate for that venue. Just to give you an example, a real world example, I tested this out. I did the same magic show. I had the same act, and I performed the same act for an audience of children, and then I performed the exact same act for an audience of adults. And can you venture a guess as to how that went? Not very well. So the review from the parents of the children's act said this act was meant more for adults, totally inappropriate for children. But then, same act for adults, their review was this was childish and more appropriate for children. Exact same act. Exact same act.
Yeah.
The problem was, to Napoleon's point, it wasn't geared towards the specific audience. It was just a generic show with no customization. It was just like taking a show off. It's like popping a DVD in and saying, okay, well, let's hope this works.
Yeah. So being very specific, Napoleon, you have continued thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, sorry, the other thing I would say, yeah, I think with children, you want to keep them sat down, but with an adult audience, you know you're engaging them if they're not coughing. Because if somebody thinks that they're permitted to cough, if you hear that in the audience, then someone else will think that they can cough. So I think, adults will generally sit down, but they may cough, and that suggests that they're not fully paying attention, unless they're talking as well. But if they're not talking and they're listening, the coughing really suggests that they're not as engaged as they want to be. Sorry, going back to this question, yeah, in terms of engaging them, you can have good attention paid your way and bad attention. I think also it depends what you're doing. You could set yourself up as being some kind of a travesty act, or an act where everything is deliberately going wrong. And so, of course, you might come on stage and present that you're going to be wonderfully suave and debonair, and then it goes immediately wrong. And so, of course, you get immediate, perhaps, I wouldn't say confusion, but you get a sort of incongruity in the audience's minds about whether you're presenting yourself as a skilled magician or a skilled performer, but the reality is that you're not skilled. But that can also create intrigue, which hopefully you then begin to build on that, and they can see that you're actually you're doing it for comedy rather than that you're just incompetent. So I agree with Jonas a little bit, because you can sort of have bad attention, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your show's bad. You may be deliberately trying to undercut the expectation of the audience. But you know, ideally, obviously, if you're playing a very straight persona of a skilled and competent magician, then yeah, you want to come on stage and be effective and grab the attention and get their interest and move forward from there.
Very well said. And I held my cough in, so thank you for reminding me. Now, I will say, well, we're starting high level here, and I want to kind of stay there because we have some people that are tuning in from the business world, and there's many applications on engagement, right? So as a manager or a leader, you may have the attention of your employees, but if you do not have their real engagement, the real motivation, the real heart in that, you're not really working with the same material. And I think the same thing is true with a magician or any act where you go out on stage and you have, yeah, they bought a ticket, so you have their attention, but it's kind of what you do with it. There's a responsibility with the attention. And I want to ask this question to everyone. And is there a difference between interaction and engagement? And while you're thinking of that, Chris, is there any comments in the chat?
Yeah, we just got one from Alexander Pineda. He just says nothing but the best, guys. And also Doc Grimes out there. Some people out there might know who that is, from DeSoto, Texas. Hello, Doc. Welcome to Thinking About Magic live stream once again. And also, if I may, Ralph Forbes wants to chime in, and he says sometimes a cough is a cough. True.
Very well said. And Doc will be a guest on our program, panelist on our program in November. So yeah. So is interaction the same thing as engagement? Let's talk about this.
Well, I suppose, I mean, interaction could be something, you know, talking to the audience, but it doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, you know, like a stand-up comedian might come out and say, how's everyone doing tonight? And, you know, that's an interaction with the audience, because presumably they can talk back and say, we're great, or we're not great. Are you feeling great? You know, but it's not really engagement, because it's very, it's a bit scattershot. You know what I mean? It's not very focused. And also it's very open-ended. It's sort of, you know, whereas I think if you directly focus on one person, it's a bit more, you might potentially get more of a quality interaction with them. But also, you know, coming out and just saying, how's it doing, everyone? How are you going? How are you? It's not necessarily, you know, it's very generic, and you're not putting forward anything. Like, you know, if you're saying, I want to do something with somebody who is very tall, you're providing a specific, or I want to show you the greatest trick in the world. I want to show you the worst trick in the world. I want to show, you know, you're giving people something a bit more to latch onto. And that probably stimulates more engagement than just sort of making a sort of bland declarative statement in a way, or a question.
Yes, you have to prepare to be engaging, I think. Jonas, what say you on this topic?
One thing that came immediately to mind was I took Steve Martin's master class on comedy. And one of the striking takeaways was his advice. He exhorted us, do not have audience participation. Now, he's specifically talking from the world of comedy. He did add a caveat: have audience participation if you're an expert in ad-libbing, if you're an expert in that, in engaging with the audience. But he says most comedians aren't skilled at that. They're skilled at telling jokes timed very well, and any sort of bringing people from the audience will derail. It has a potential to derail the act. Now, all of that is to say, interaction can be done skillfully, and it can be done unskillfully. It can be done in a positive way that is constructive for the act, and it can be done in a negative way that detracts, to the point that Braden was mentioning, a positive engagement versus negative engagement. However, in the world of magic, there are overlaps. Certainly magic and comedy have overlaps. But I think especially in magic, in the most meaningful magic that I've experienced, there's some sort of interaction more meaningful than just, hey, how you guys doing? Hoping for, a rhetorical question. You don't actually want a response when you get that sort of question. But to Napoleon's point of interacting with a specific person, whether going down into the audience with them or bringing them up onto stage, that's where a meaningful interaction can come into play to build in engagement for that individual, but also by proxy, that person now becomes the eyewitness for everyone. That person is one of them. That very well could have been them. I was in Boston a couple of weeks ago, and I saw a street performer, and it was the classic example. I was sitting right up front. He had this big crowd, and he was calling for volunteers. I did not want to volunteer. I did not want to be a participant. I wanted to watch. So I had that anxiety in me. If he called on me, I would have done it joyfully, but I didn't want to. And oh my goodness, when he was looking around for people, I was like, oh, he's totally going to call on me, because it really could be anyone. So just the fact that you're pulling people, you're interacting with people, you're talking with them, not at them, you're talking with them, you're literally engaging them. They are becoming co-creators of this experience, which is the third key. I have those three keys: interest, attention, and then the third one is desire, which is all about that social curiosity, getting people involved, becoming co-creators, because they're now because people support that which they help create.
Sorry, just to add into that a little bit. I think engagement also is about your theme. That's great, Jonas. I totally agree with you, and I think engagement's perhaps more about your theme. Interaction might be your little comments to the audience. It might come in different forms, but I think engagement is to do with the premise of your show, is to do with the theme of what you're doing in that moment, whether it resonates with the audience more. I mean, obviously you can have interactivity with that engagement, but I think engagement is perhaps on a deeper level. There was a very interesting magician on the Mystery School Monday broadcast last week. His name's Norberto Janssenson, and he was talking about starting his show with a story, and as a result, when we tell stories, they stimulate multiple areas of the brain at once. So anyone who's very analytical, their brain is being stimulated in an emotional way, and it makes them perhaps less critical of what information they're receiving. But the great way about starting with a story in Norberto's show structure is it gives something to the audience that they can immediately latch on to. It engages them perhaps on a deeper level thematically with what they're about to see, and and it invites them to interact. From you've given them something already to digest, and then perhaps when you ask for interaction, people have a sense of who you are, how you're presenting your material, and hopefully they have a positive answer as to whether they want to interact with you.
Wonderfully said. Well, let's get back to this. So hold your thought, Jonas, because I want to come back to this idea of the rapport building that's required. But Chris, you've got some comments in the chat we can get to.
I do. Actually, Doc Grimes, he says, only if the interaction comes off as genuine and inviting. You have to demonstrate that you really care about the audience. Now, if I may, Braden, I wanted to add, at least how I take the question. Is interaction the same thing as engagement? And if you see the longer version of my Faustak, which is basically music driven, I don't really have a volunteer come up on stage to participate in the magic act. However, I'm fully aware that at least my intention is to interact by nonverbal connection, which I take as engagement, or in another term, as connection. So that's how I took the question as, is interaction the same thing as engagement? And I think Juan Tamariz had also said that he makes sure that he establishes this string of eye contact with the audience. And once that's broken away, the connection is gone and you have to reestablish that. And I sort of took that as engagement as well, as this attempt to connect with the audience. So that's how I took it. And if I may, we do have one more comment here. And it is Michael Blackheart. Do any of you think there is a way to practice engagement or interaction without a trial by fire in live situations? Michael Blackheart.
I'll jump in just for a second on this, because when it comes to the world of leadership and management, and all three of you have hit on some really key aspects, that engagement is layers. There are multiple layers to this thing we call engagement. There's a physical engagement, like a physical interaction, and then there's the psychological interaction. There's engaging the psyche and understanding that you're going through levels of engagement, and you're starting with visual, maybe the imagination, and then maybe we're bringing someone up. There's a lot of activity there with that. There's a lot of insights there. What I see in business all the time is the happy Friday, happy Monday, everybody. How's everyone doing, right? And so you're already, not engaged at all, because, you just look at the calendar and you go, oh, I think he's going to say happy Tuesday, because it's Tuesday and it's happy Tuesday. So we want to kind of avoid those types of things. But I want to go back to the question, which is, how can you practice it? So I practice it because I go to meetings and I do Zoom calls when I network with people. So I practice all sorts of different engaging things, especially virtually here. But if you can just practice it anywhere, even outside the context of performance, start looking at other areas of your life where you can bring magic into and bring that, that practice of engagement. Because really, if you get engaged and you can really understand engagement and how people are engaged, it really matters. If to Napoleon's point, if someone tells a story in a theater, it's wonderful. If it's a good story and well told. And if they tell a story in a meeting, it's wonderful. And it can really inspire change. And so I think it really, take some of these aspects that we're talking about and start to apply them in all different areas of your life. And I think that's a good practice. But I'll turn it over to Jonas. I know he had a thought that I cut off, so I'll let you get back to that.
Sorry to cut you off, Jonas, but I just want to point out, we have a comment here. Jeff McBride says, my motto is engagement transforms a passive objective witness into an active subjective participant. So just food for thought there. Thank you, Jeff.
I am taking vociferous notes on my note cards for all this, which I appreciate. I really appreciate all these gold nuggets all of these 5 panelists are giving. So thank you. Yeah, so I forget exactly what I was going to respond. There was something that Napoleon said that had an aha moment for me. And it's this idea that engagement is perhaps more of a cognitive / effective emotional experience without necessarily having the physicality of it. It could have that physical nature of it where they're doing something, but at its very core, you have to first get their emotions and get them thinking and get them emotionally invested in the experience. That alone is sufficient to engage them. Am I summarizing that idea correctly?
I think so, yes. And I want to pull up Jeff's comment here as well. The one about conversation is the key. And he also talks about it being practiced daily in another comment as well. And I think maybe the first person you need to engage is yourself. I think if you can, find ways where you're not engaged, because these leaders that I work with, they want to be engaged, but they might not be, right? And there might be a blockage to that. So the same thing that might be happening with your audience might be happening with you. And I also want to point out the real fact that Jeff McBride is one of the masters of engagement. Yes. He has a Magic and Meaning pep talk. 2020, if you're a member of the McBride Magic and Mystery School, go to magicalwisdom.com, become a member, sign up for Magic and Meaning next week if you can. But go to the pep talk. You get that as your membership dues. They do a lot of wonderful work with students and the school, and really just there's just a great community. So check them out, and specifically check out the Magic and Meaning 2020 pep talk by Jeff McBride, Connecting with Magic. And he goes through a whole range of thoughts on this connection. And as he said, turning objective witnesses into subjective participants, because in the business world, you get a lot of this, and Jeff talks about how you need to break that. So if you recognize the tightness and you find a way to change the state in your audiences and in life.
So, Braden, I just wanted to answer the question for Michael that he said about practicing engagement. I think, one way of practicing engagement is scripting. If you're doing a magic show, obviously you're going to present a series of different effects, and you're going to try and put them together in a sort of harmonious way, and hopefully in a way that has resonance to the audience. And so I think one way of practicing the engagement is scripting your tricks or your effects so that they have with premises that resonate with the audience, depending on what kind of audience you're playing to. So, if you're playing to children, you might want to have things that resonate with objects that are organic to their world, like maybe toys or candy or things like that, or things to do with adventure. For older people, professionals and business people, you might want to be presenting things that you're exploring the boundaries of reality, the limits of possibility, and then obviously breaking what they think are the laws of nature. So, and that's one way of practicing engagement, having these premises and having your script very sort of dynamic and very sort of maybe more emotional, or, maybe you're telling a ghost story, things that sort of universal things that people are always intrigued by. In terms of practicing the interaction, once you've got your script, if you know what kind of audience you're performing to, you have a sense, I think, sometimes of how they might respond. After a while, you get a sense of, if I do this, they might respond in this way. If I ask somebody to hold something, like, for example, an adult audience, you ask somebody to come up on stage, you might have a bit more hesitation than you might get from a much younger audience member. And so although you can't absolutely fully practice the interactivity, you do get a sense of what might work on stage. And then, of course, then you have to sort of test it in the field and then refine it from there. But yeah, so the interactivity is perhaps a little bit harder to practice without the audience. But I think you can practice the engagement in terms of working out what is interesting. And sometimes it's as easy as working out what is interesting to you in terms of magic. Why do I care about this particular thing I'm seeing? And then finding a way to present it to the audience.
I'd like to piggyback off of that, Napoleon, if I may. Excellent words. One of the things that I've found works great for my own practicing engagement is, yes, everything that I say on stage, everything that I intend to say anyway, is scripted. I leave nothing to chance. I need to have all of my words there as a roadmap, so that I know how to get out of the woods if I need to. If I get lost, just go back to the path of the script. However, much of the engagement, to your point, to Napoleon, is knowing when to have those interactive points, which you can't rehearse. You can't rehearse what someone else is going to say because you don't know what they're going to say. But being able to have an audience of your peers, perhaps, or in low stakes situations where the understanding is, I'm rehearsing this show, will you come and interact, be a practice audience for me. So it's practicing in front of a practice audience, so it's not really under fire, using blanks, so to speak. But then once you gain confidence from there, then you'll be able to much more naturally be able to bring in those interactive points, in those engagement points, much more fluently.
Yeah, I think as well, you don't know what they're going to say, but sometimes you know how they might react, or, based as a human, like, for example, if you produce a smelly sock and give it to someone, or you say it's smelly or whatever it might be, something disgusting, there usually will be some kind of visceral reaction. There may be none. And that also is interesting as well, that there is no reaction. It sort of disrupts the pattern of what we expect. But yeah, I totally agree. Sometimes you don't know what they're going to say, but you sometimes get a sense of what their emotional reaction might be to a certain stimulus.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up this this comment as well. Thank you, Napoleon and Jonas, for your thoughts on this. And Ralph has, in magic, to me, you are in a continuous engagement with the audience. You're bringing them into your world. And I just want to highlight something that a performer that Napoleon had mentioned, Norberto Janison has a TED Talk. So put in Norberto Janison on Google and find his TED Talk. You're going to see a very masterful way that he starts with those levels of engagement. So the first way is he tells a very funny joke and draws people in. So everyone is now laughing. So that's the first level, right? And then he tells an engaging, meaningful, heartfelt story. So that's the second level. And then he brings someone up on stage and they create a story. And because, as Jeff McBride had said, people are interested in people. Now it's like gone to that level. And I think there's that pattern you can bring. Now, I know there's a 20-second delay on our live stream. So I want to kick this out to our fifth panelist. This is a question for everyone. What engages audiences? And I have a list from Fitzky and Showmanship for Magicians, but I want to hear from you. What do you think engages audiences? Give us some ideas, and we'll talk about this as a panel as well. And one of those areas is the senses. Jeff had told me one time, Jeff McBride had said this: if you want a sensational show, you have to engage all of the senses. And I think that's really valuable. So I'll kick it around as the audience is getting their answers in our chat on what they think engages audiences. What are some techniques or some things that really engage audiences, from a practical standpoint? Napoleon.
Yeah, I think story is a big one. I mean, what is the story of your show? I mean, Chris performs as a character, as he has a very definite persona, and although he may not necessarily be talking to the audience, he has a lot to say, but he doesn't, like Michael Caine used to say about acting when you don't have any lines. You may not have any lines, but you have a lot to say through your body language, your vocal expressions, your physical expressions. And so I think sometimes as performers, when we're talking to the audience in a sort of stand-up patter magical way, or as a presenter in business, it doesn't look perhaps to the audience that there is a story to what we're doing. It looks like we're just presenting information or we're demonstrating magic. But there is a story, and there can be a story. Is everything we're doing going the way we want it to go? Are we building to some big emotional trajectory that may be a little bit less obvious than you might find in a narrative theater show, where there's obviously a villain and a hero, and they struggle and they achieve some kind of resolution. So I think story is definitely something that is important to think about when you're presenting the story of your show, even if it doesn't necessarily comprise your individual tricks. It might be some narrative theme that's underlaying everything. And the other thing I'd say about that is, there's trick interactivity. So you might get somebody up for a routine, and then there's narrative interactivity. Trademark me. But narrative interactivity in terms of giving the audience, empowering the audience to have a say in your show. So you might say produce two different things, and they have a choice over, what you're going to do next, perhaps. Or in mentalism, you're presenting various effects where, they have choice over how the outcome will be. And so I think that really stimulates a lot of engagement as well. The sense that if they'd chosen something else, if they had made the choice, the show would have gone in a different direction. Even if, you've planned it out to go in a certain direction, it looks at least like there is this kind of empowering opportunity for different outcomes.
Because there's a story either way. There's a story of that interaction is going to be a story that they're telling themselves as they watch it, right? The audience is going, okay, is this genuine? Is the performer taking care and being respectful of this person? And what does that tell me about the character of that performer? And so there's multiple stories, the one that the performer is attempting to tell and the one that the audience is actually reading, right? Napoleon, you have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm doing my children's shows, I mean, quite often I'll have some kind of big premise, like, obviously maybe we're trying to make a birthday present for the birthday child, but my wand's broken, or I've suddenly opened a box. I've got a box and it's locked and I don't know the password to it, and I need their help to to get it into, and then I open the box and there's a clue to a treasure map or something like that. So I'm trying to create a very definite narrative of we're here, but we're trying to get somewhere else, and we've got a journey that may not go in a straight line. It may go forward and back, and and I feel like obviously you don't see that perhaps as much sometimes in adult magic shows, but I think there are elements of that in a lot of adult magic performances where the magician in a particular trick, it's not going well, and then obviously they pull it back from some perceived defeat. They pull it back at the last moment. So, but I think it makes it much more engaging because there's a sense of vulnerability about the performer, and it creates a more dynamic story rather than being the performer is omnicompetent at every moment of the show. But I mean, that's one way of structuring or framing your show. It doesn't have to be that way. You could be the omnicompetent performer. It's just a little bit about how you relate to the audience and how your persona, how your character as the magician, how your character performs magic.
And what's your kryptonite? What is your vulnerability? Because the audience can't relate to your superpowers. They can only relate to your vulnerability. That's why Magician in Trouble is so, it's so entertaining to lay audiences, but it's also overused quite a bit because we know that whole vulnerability aspect and what is the kryptonite, what's the foil that's trying to circumvent your every move. Hopefully it's not your spectator or your participant. Hopefully there's built-in kind of conflict there. But Jonas, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this as well. We'll take your comment and then we'll go to the comments.
I do, and also just to piggyback off of what you just said about they can't relate to the superpower, but they can relate to the vulnerability. Oh my goodness, that struck a chord. Absolutely. I would also suggest it's a both and. Everyone can, though, relate to the desire for a superpower. So if we could find a way to tap into that could become a very engaging plot to tap into. But to go back to some of my ideas about tools for engagement, some of the things that Napoleon was touching on as well, there are 3 questions that I think about when I'm writing a show or writing a presentation to deliver a workshop, or even if I'm just going to a meeting or having an interaction. Even just in this conversation with you folks, there's 3 questions that I want to make sure I'm able to answer affirmatively. And it's, do I care about you? Can you trust me? And can I help you? And it's actually coming in all directions, because you want to know, do I care about you? You want to know, can you trust me? You want to know, can this person help me? And I want to be able to, at the very, very least, start with that care one, because no one's going to care about if I can help them if they don't think I actually care about them. So in all of the engagement, in all of the interactions, in every piece that I do, whether it's on stage or if it's in line at the grocery store or just passing someone on the street, how can I find a way to answer these questions for the people that I'm interacting with? But there's one more thing that I want to share, because this is absolutely, by far, hands down, perhaps the biggest engagement tool that I've incorporated in the past several years, and it's the ukulele. Oh my goodness. When I am on stage, this solves so many solutions. I start playing softly. You can hear the silence. Everyone's leaning in. They're like, oh, what's he playing? And now I'm talking. It builds this, so all of a sudden it gets their attention. It generates their interest in what is he saying. And oh my goodness, that immediately gets the engagement level up to enormous heights. So it doesn't have to be go play the ukulele, but it's, what's your ukulele? What's your something different? What's your something that's going to stimulate the environment, to get their attention, to really draw them in, to drive that attention, so that you can answer those 3 questions. Does he care about me? Can I trust him? Can he help me?
And you're also disrupting the pattern of their expectations as well. It's exciting because maybe you were talking for 5 minutes and now suddenly you just pull that out. It's something different. It's something they didn't expect that. It's a different tonal shift in the performance or the presentation. And of course, it's music, which again is very evocative and stimulates the senses on a different level than just speech.
I also see that Ralph in the comment section
Yeah.
mentions music as a great way to assist guiding the feelings of, whether it's danger, scary, wonder, surprise, laughter. There it is. It's a wonderful way to invoke and complement the emotions that you're trying to work with, because emotions, as we've been saying this whole time, that is what is going to engage people.
Well, and I would say as well, if you look at movies and just movie trailers in general, where they have to grab your attention, they're using primarily two modes. One is the music, and the second is the visual. The third element that they're using is dialogue. So you hear music first usually, and then there's a fade in of some sort, maybe a flash of something, maybe a quick cut, cutting to here, cutting to here, cutting to here, and then a little piece of dialogue. And that little piece of dialogue is what we focus on a lot as magicians, and we don't focus as much on the quick cuts, how's it all going to be put together, and the music. So you guys have hit really some important parts of engagement. One is stories, so that was huge, and then two is music, and we'll still put it out there for the rest of the group, because we're going to cover off on some different techniques for engagement that some of the masters use. But I think, Chris, we've got some comments, so go ahead. And
I do. So let me run down just to piggyback off of what Jonas said. You reminded me of what Max Maven said, and I think, Jeff, if I'm getting this wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, but he did point out that there are two things to think about when you enter a stage. Who are you, and why should I care? And I think that care part is very critical for you as a performer and how you connect with people out there. And I think, as far as me, when I come out on the stage, I always look at, or at least my intention is, to get the audience or bring up topics or material where the audience can see themselves as being me on stage. Can they relate to the subject matter? And I think that's very important. But Jeff McBride had brought up his comment, and he says, yes, Napoleon, if the performer is engaged and interesting, the audience will engage and be interested. I was at the close-up gallery, Braden, with Jeff at the Magic Castle, and I asked him, as a student, what is your first intention when you come out into the audience? And I always remember what he said. He says, my first intention is to enchant, at least in that circumstance, is to enchant the audience. So our second comment here is Michael Blackheart. He says, wow, these are great answers, and they are helping me get over a recent mind block. Thank you very much. And thank you, Michael, for commenting. And then our third one here is Doc Grimes. First, strong practice, masterful performance. An audience will become distant and disengaged by weak performances. Well said, Doc. Thank you.
Yes, well said. And what engagement we have out there in the community. And we would love to hear your questions on this topic. And I'm going to give a few thoughts. And one of them is, this is why you're here, because we go through the books. This is Showmanship for Magicians by Daryl Fitzke. And in the back of this book, if you have this book, there's a valuable index in the back of this book. And one of those indexes is audience appeals. And we'll run through some audience appeals because we've already hit most of them, right? We hit music, rhythm, movement, personality, which could be also kind of linked into character, but it could also be style, right? What are the colors? What are the hues? What's the vibrancy? What are you trying? What's the lighting look like? Harmony, here are some other ones in your stories. Romance, nostalgia, sentiment, surprise, which Napoleon pointed out. What's the situation? Situation comedies exist because they're engaging. So what kind of situation, and Napoleon had given some great examples on different situations you could put into your performances that can garner interest. What is the physical action? I just want to point out that I had the pleasure of watching Carissa Hendricks lecture at TAOM, and without giving away her lecture at all, her lecture opens with music and physical action for about 3 minutes, and you are completely engaged in what she's doing because she's doing a physical action that is really matters to her audience of magicians. And I just think that's a real lesson without giving anything away. It's a huge lesson for me that I took away. Just that physical action to music to begin, as you said, Chris, as Jeff said, to enchant. Group activity, group coordination. I think, Jonas, you do a lot of group coordinating type activities or type effects when you talk to people. I believe maybe they involve dreams. In fact, that's a powerful technique. Another one is a demonstration of skill, thrilling the audience, spectacle. We know danger, but anytime you can take people out of the humdrum day, that's why jugglers and things like people don't see all the time, like fire, that those things are really enchanting. They're also very dangerous, so be careful with that. But they bring these other elements in play in that engagement. So Jonas, I want to talk to you a little bit about group engagement. You do a lot of workshops, you do a lot of keynote speaking, and you do a lot of engaging audiences on all different levels and different types. So can you speak a little bit about group engagement and kind of your experiences or stories from that world?
Absolutely. And everything that I do is it goes through this lens of my three keys of engagement: attention, interest, and desire. And because again, we could have something amazing to share with people, but if we don't have their attention, they're not going to care. So get their attention through Carissa Hendricks's idea, music and physical activity. That's it's the idea of generating perceptual curiosity. These are the three curiosities. Perceptual curiosity is first. Something interesting in the environment arouses your curiosity. The challenge is it wanes quickly, but it's great for people who might be in your audience who don't want to be there. This often happens. If I'm doing a keynote presentation at a conference, everyone's required to be there, but half the people don't want to be there. That's where Jonas Cain comes in. With my ukulele and my magic tricks and my little lights. So arousing the attention, getting their attention, and then driving that relevance. Relevance in meaning are similar but different things. Relevance, it's relevant to their current goals, things that they're working towards, but meaning, it's really meaning towards their past experiences. And all those things that you just lifted off, Braden, touch on both meaning and relevance as well. So that's how we get epistemic curiosities. So there's perceptual curiosity, something's happening here, stop, look around, and then epistemic curiosity, something interesting, something it's generating interest now, and that's when you can really dive into getting people involved and start doing those interactivities, especially if you've built trust. No one's going to want to get involved. No one's going to want to come and be a part of the presentation and be engaged physically if they don't trust you. And I've seen that so many times. I've been that person that didn't trust the performer. Like, I don't want to get on stage. So I completely understand, which is why I think, I don't know of any magicians who start their act with an audience participation piece with bringing someone on stage. I mean, I'm sure it's been done, but it's only a skillful performer perhaps can pull that one off, because you haven't built that trust. They don't know who you are yet. They don't care about you, and they don't trust you yet. But once you build that trust, after getting their attention and generating their interest, then you can get more into that social curiosity. And this is more getting into getting involved, getting people up onto stage, getting people to become active participants in this. And there's this one particular piece that I always try and find an excuse to perform. I call it dream psychometry. That's just what I call it. I don't actually call it that to the audience, but it's just this idea of getting people to write something down. It's an excuse for this meaningful interaction. Instead of having someone just write down random things or pick a word from a book, what I'm doing is I'm getting them to think about their goals, think about their dreams, think about something meaningful that they're working towards. And I invite everyone in the audience to do this, but then I invite 4 people from the audience to actually write it down and commit to it. And then it just becomes this idea of, now I have to guess whose dream belongs to which person. As a trick, it's kind of silly, you know, it's a no-brainer trick. But as an engaging piece, this is the one that everyone is talking about afterwards, because everyone is laughing. Everyone is leaning in. There's literally people on stage who are actively involved, but the people in the audience, again, they are proxy members now. It could have been them. And they're thinking about, if they were on stage, what would they have written down? They're thinking about how would they respond to these situations. It becomes this truly engaging thing. And after that piece, we're it's no longer audience and presenter. We're all just one and the same, having this shared experience. But it takes, building that trust and showing care and getting them to that moment. Once we're at that moment, we can do anything together.
Yes, and dreams are taboo. I mean, in this culture, the American culture at least, it's very taboo. There's lots of traditions that say toss the coin in and don't say your secret out loud, or your dream out loud. Blow the candles out, but don't tell anyone your wish, right? So it's a very it's interesting that it doesn't seem like it should be taboo, but it is a very interesting topic, because we don't necessarily talk about our dreams, and there's a lot of information in our dreams. There's a lot of inspiration in our dreams. There's a lot of personal growth that can happen if we analyze our dreams. But the dream topic is very, very valuable, I think.
What's interesting about dreams specifically is, I mean, this is now going into more the personal growth realm, but to drive engagement, if we don't share our dreams, we're not going to be held accountable. That's not to say that we need to share everything. We don't need to share all of our plans with people. But if you share something, if you tell someone you're going to do something, now you're accountable to that person, because now you have to follow through.
Yes, and that's a big deal. Now, Napoleon, you also work with groups in theater and in children's shows. You probably have some insights on how to engage groups of kids or people or whatnot. Give it to us.
Yeah. I mean, again, it depends on the audience, really. But one thing I would say is we're kind of props in other people's experiences as performers. We are, as much as we, off stage, we're thinking about how we're going to do the show. When we're on stage, we're part of their experience. And so we have to sort of sublimate what we're doing to the experience we're trying to create for them. So, for example, I would say that we know that humans are kind of mirrors. So if I come on stage with a lot of energy and confidence, the audience the audience members are going to feel that I'm very confident about what I'm doing. If I come on stage a little bit tentative, or pretend to be tentative, and I feel a little bit nervous, or I give that vibe off, people are going to think, oh no, he's not sure what he's doing. How's this going to go? So, and I think you kind of, from a different discipline, in screen acting, it's the same way. They say in film acting that the camera never lies. So if you're somebody who's a method actor, or you're really living the emotions that you're trying to deliver in the script, the camera sees the truth of that. And it's kind of the same on stage. Even if you're nervous, if you're projecting confidence and dynamism, or it could be magnetism, you're trying to draw people into what you're doing. But if you're projecting this kind of, what you're doing, you could be full of energy, or you could be very focused in your energy. But if you're projecting that will come across to the audience, and obviously that will be very engaging to them. Whereas if you don't feel confident in what you're doing, and you show that to the audience, then they pick up on that as well. I did a workshop with Avner Eisenberg, Avner the Eccentric, and he was talking very much about what energy you give off physically, and how that affects the audience's interpretation of your performance. I mean, obviously, you might want to pretend that you're nervous if that's your end game, and then you're going to subvert that later on in the show. But if you're nervous just because you're nervous, then that may not be the best strategy for your performance, for engaging the audience.
Yes, you really have to be in the right space. Whatever you're trying to project, you need to go there right before the show, and there's so many things that can happen to us that that you might not be in that space. I mean, we're magicians, and we're doing this as a living, and we go to gigs, and we, you know, last minute they tell you the microphones don't work, or the projector screen doesn't work, or, you know, whatever it happens to be, or your audience is leaving and there's a new audience coming in with different people, and you somehow have to get back into that moment. And so that's really a skill set. Chris, you popped up a comment there.
Yeah.
Let's pop that right up.
Yeah, so I have one from Michael Blackheart. I've always recognized that dreams are very personal, but dreams are taboo. Mind blown. So true, so powerful. Thank you, Michael. And also I have one here from Edward Ruiz. If you show confidence in the beginning, later you can show vulnerability. What a great point. And if I could just chime in on this thought on group engagement, I just wanted to say one thing. When as a, you know, performer, I always try to think, how do I get this audience to see this experience, this performance as a journey that we are being taken together. This is a journey that we are all taking together from beginning to end. And that's my thought on group engagement as far as the question.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add one thing. I think also sometimes it depends a little bit on why they're there, because I think you can do something more easily that's artistic or a little bit out of the common experience of your audience if they've come to see you. But if they haven't come to see you, then it can be harder sometimes to do something that's a little bit more obscure to their experience. And so sometimes, you know, you might want to do something that's a bit more, who wants to win some money, or who would like to eat some candy, or, you know, let's try this. You might have to play with their desires, their universal human desires, winning prizes or getting rich, or, you know, these things that we know as humans we're all kind of on some level interested in. Yeah. But yeah.
If I could chime in on that, yes, that's actually something that I really look at my performances is, you know, because I wear a mask and it can be obscure, it could be off-putting to a lot of people. You know, one thing that has helped me, and I know Jeff has touched on this subject so many times, and it could be a huge topic on its own and discussion on its own. But what I do as a performer, and mainly music driven, is I look at magic as an experience to be given, right? So I realize, though, there's a flaw in what you said there, Napoleon, that not everyone is willing to receive that gift. And I know I've had the experience where someone was trying to give me a physical gift, and I was like, I don't want to, because maybe my relationship with that person isn't that great. So therein lies the obstacle. But however, I look at that as the chemistry. How do I establish that? If I can get that person to receive my magic as a gift through pantomime and all these techniques that we learn, then when they receive it, they also give something back. So, and I think it's through applause, laughter, or whatever, and then in turn you give more of the magic. So that is the challenge, and but the intention that I have for anyone out there interested is that I look at magic as a gift to be given, but recognize that sometimes that gift isn't always received or wanted. But, you know, and you go from there.
And it can be.
They don't always. Oh, sorry. I was just saying the audience don't always know initially when you walk on what you're going to be or who you're going to be. And I think if you're thematically going to be comedy for most of your show, then it makes sense to be funny fairly quickly. You know, unless you are not funny and then subvert that with something funny 2 minutes in. If you're going to be very mysterious, that may be the way that you build engagement initially. So, and obviously, if you want to establish that you're very competent magically, then you want to do something that's very immediately that seems very competent. But again, it's all about how, you know, I think it's thinking about the overall dynamic of the show. If you're a storyteller magician, it may not be the best thing to start potentially with a very dynamic magical effect. You might want to draw people in more magnetically. So it's, again, I think it's thinking about the overall strategy of what the overall tone is that you're setting to first build engagement. But yeah.
Well, I'll jump in on this too, because Chris, you brought up a great point, which is when you get a gift, it comes with the giver. There's a receiver and a giver, and there's the gift. There's three things. And if they're not accepting the gift, or you don't feel like you should accept the gift, and it's attached to the giver. You see, if you just walk out and find $100 on the sidewalk, that's lost and found. That's not a gift, right? There's no giver. There's no known giver. You don't know who gave this gift. So it doesn't really feel like a gift, but a gift always comes with a giver. And so if our magic is a gift, then the relationship that they have, the audience has with the giver, is crucial, right? And that's really what Confetti Eddie was talking about here. If you show confidence on stage, you're the giver. So when you first come out, you are the thing. Ross Johnson says you're the opening effect. Your personality. In the Buckley trilogy, Arthur Buckley talks about in Principles and Deceptions, he talks about, is it possible to generate favorable attention, going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation today? Is it possible that someone could walk on stage with music, dressed appropriately, with the right demeanor, and generate favorable attention? And the answer is yes. But we got to figure out how to do that. And that's you being the giver. You're walking on stage as the giver of your magic. So that I thought was very insightful, Chris. Thank you for sharing that and your experience with that. This is a great question by Michael Blackheart. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So Michael Blackheart says, would you say that there is such a thing as bad engagement? Or does the old saying, no such thing as bad press, apply to engagement as well? And I think Jonas touched on this earlier. Anyone care to chime in?
Yes, I'll jump in. There is bad engagement. There is bad engagement. And maybe the fifth panelist out there can give us some examples of this, but awkwardness, the ick, if you feel like you're getting creeped out by something, and there are effects out there can lend itself to the ick factor. A great example of one that Doc Grimes shared with me recently, and we as magicians know what this is, but it's French kiss. And there's been major acts have used this effect, and you can take that too far. You can take anything too far. And that is really trying to figure out where is the line and what do you want to engage in. So when you say bad engagement that you had there, which was great, Michael, you need to ask yourself what is the gift you're trying to give, and does the engagement match that gift? Does it match your gift? Does it match your character? Does it match the story? Does it match the story that you want the audience to tell at the end of the program? Thoughts, Napoleon? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can, bad engagement could be unintentional as well. I mean, you might misread the audience and think, oh, this is totally appropriate, this effect I'm about to do, this routine, this joke I'm telling, and then realize that it's not appropriate. And that's unfortunate. Or you may just blithely think, oh, the 20th century bra trick, I can do it in every single, the 20th century silks with a bra. I could do it in every potential audience type of show that I have. And I don't think I would use that ever. But I mean, it's not, unless I did it on myself, and that might be funny. But I mean, because it's incongruous and it's unexpected and it's a surprise, and I'm the one that's making myself look bad. I'm not trying to make someone else look silly. But yeah, I think there's unintentional bad engagement and an intentional bad engagement where you kind of come hell or high water, you're going to do your most blue material at the retirement home or at the the Christian Women's Union of whatever. You just, I think you have to sort of look at your script, and you have to look at the audience and what is it really that they're going to enjoy, and make a decision about really, because ultimately you can give them a great experience, but you can give another audience a different great experience. But what are you going to give to this audience that you're in front of right now?
I think that really speaks to the importance of relevance, being relevant to the people in front of you.
And there's, Jonas, you brought up magic and meaning and memory and relevance. And there was some controversy that we uncovered in our research for tonight's programming. And one of those is that there's the learning styles that is popularized out there. Auditory learner, kinesthetic learner, hands-on learner, your experiential learner, visual learner. And those are all modalities. Those are all channels of information that you can impact. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, and the interesting research that we uncovered, it was fascinating, and even though some of the research contradict each other, but I think in the grander scheme, it wasn't so much the contradiction, but it was more of the more sensories, going back to a previous comment that you had made, Braden, about if we want to have a sensational act, engage all of these senses. Certainly certain things that we're going to experience might lend themselves to having to be more of a visual experience. Some of them might have to be a more auditory experience. Some of them will have to be a more hands-on experience. But if you can engage all of these senses, as many as you possibly can, I mean, imagine, I was trying to think of a magic act that could incorporate temperature, like, making the room colder or hotter, or, incorporating scent, having scent filling the room. These are all ways that we can literally, to your point, Braden, about engaging all of these senses to help create, I like to call them bookmarks. If we have something that is meaningful to us, it's this meaningful experience, it creates a bookmark in our day. And if we have a lot of these bookmarks, all of a sudden our days, our moments are going to become far more meaningful, because we'll look back on them and, with fondness, or at least remembrance. So those learning styles are so important for creating those bookmarks, creating those meaningful experiences.
Yes, and
I think Jeff beat me to it. Sorry.
It's all right, go for it. Jeff just made a comment. Seance uses scent and temperature stimuli. Napoleon, what did you have to say about that?
I was just going to say, I think the more supernatural, I mean, you could do it in any environment where you're presenting magic, but I think the more the supernatural environment you're creating, that also helps as well in terms of using different senses. And I know there are, for sure, definitely some bizarre magic effects that rely on sort of heat changes and which, you could take the actual prop and put it in a completely different type of show. But yeah, exactly. The more you play with the environment, I think, again, as you say, the more exciting and memorable it is to the audience, who perceive that there is an incongruity with the environment they regularly are in, and the new environment you're presenting to them, or the laws of nature and the laws of reality that they normally operate in, and whatever the laws are of the experience you're creating for them.
If I could jump in there, Braden, Jeff also made another comment here. At our events, we have all senses engaged. We very consciously engage all senses, more sensational magic. What a great saying. And, I think it was Jeff who told me this, that sometimes it's good to spray the room with a scent that is different from what is outside of the stage. And I keyed in on that aspect, because now you are walking, it seems like you are walking into a different setting or world. And I think that olfactory change is significant to contributing to this topic or learning styles. And I think it impacts the audience's experience.
And that's a very practical advice. And I mean that because you go into some theaters and they smell like 10,000 mothballs. And you go into some conference rooms and you're like, what is that smell? And it's like you look over and John's lunch has been sitting there, molding for 3 weeks because no one took the trash out on Friday. And so, Jeff has here, even using your own cologne is better than the smell of beer on the fourth menu. Yes, like mine, absolutely. Yeah, it's very practical. And it's very powerful. And I want to give just a few other ones as we kind of head towards wrapping up. But I want to, ask the audience. We're going to be going shortly into final thoughts from everyone, and we'd love to hear your final thoughts. So pop them in the chat, and we'll get to those. We know there's a 20-second delay or so that you're hearing this. So go ahead and think about what have you learned today. What is your insights from today? And let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And before we do, I want to just give some other real valuable resources. One is Tarbell. And if you go to Penguin, the magicians know what I'm talking about. You go there, and there's a wonderful series done by Penguin and Darren Harlan about the whole Tarbell series. And one of the chapters that they broke down was it's called Tarbell 20, and it is all about how to please your audience. And a few of the things they talk about, number one is engaging the mind. That's very important. And in fact, in the TED Talk that I brought up that I hope everyone goes and watches, I'll pop a link into it after we get off live stream. Noberto Jenninson, one of those elements that he uses is has everyone shut their eyes and go through this imaginative experience. And so we talked about that when you can go back to this and watch the rest of that. But there were 4 that Dan brought up out of Tarbell. Love, friendship, though that's a powerful subject matter for your audience. Wealth, money, security, that's a popular one. Health is a popular topic. And adventure. Chris, Napoleon, Jonas, you all kind of got into this world of adventure. We're taking people into this experience, this adventure. People want to get out of themselves and go on an adventure. And they want it at the least possible effort. That's why these streaming services like Facebook Live and YouTube Live, where you are watching this, are so popular because they want that sense of adventure. They want to go on a journey. And it is really the journey of engagement. And if you really think about engagement as a journey, I think that can be very powerful for you. Another area is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So what we're going to do now, Chris, if you want to bring up the powerful questions for the audience,
yes,
that would be awesome. And then we'll go through the other ones as well. But let's start with the powerful questions.
All right, here they go, Braden. They're all yours.
So some of the things we've learned tonight is what stories are you telling and how many varieties? Jeff McBride, and I want you to pop up, Chris, if you can, the thing about his new show that's coming out. And I just want to say, Jeff McBride with Magic Quest, it's like a Russian nesting doll of stories. It's the great story of his love and his journey with magic, and then successive stories within a story that really make it engaging and compelling. And so that really inspired me to ask the question, is there a difference between interaction and engagement? Because he's proven to me that he has minimal interaction, what magicians would term as interaction, but he has maximum engagement. And that to me is powerful. Minimum interaction with maximum engagement. And that is what Jeff does. And he's got that new show coming up. So definitely check that out. I think there's only a handful of tickets left, or 100 tickets, and they're going to sell out, maybe more, but get your tickets. So yes, Masked Magic and Monsters. I am imploring everyone who's listening to go watch this. You're going to get an object lesson in engagement and storytelling. So check it out. So how many varieties of stories? What senses are you playing to? We talked about that. What senses could you include more of? Which audience appeals do you incorporate? Remember, Fitzke, Showmanship for Magicians. That's where you can get those list of audience appeals. And what is missing from what you do? Let's go to the next one. Maybe you can pop up either the hierarchy of needs or the that's perfect. Maslow's needs. You may have seen this before in maybe a psychology class or maybe a business talk. So if you're a magician, don't put the snooze button on, because this has been proven as a way to understand how people are engaged psychologically. So you want to make sure that there's always a level of safety. So from a leadership standpoint, you want to make sure your teams feel safe, that they can talk about topics in a safe environment. That's the base level. In your show, you want to make sure that you have safety is important. Do people feel safe in that environment? And that is so important. And then it goes on, safety needs, personal security, employment, resources, health, property. All of those things could be subject matter for your effects and your presentations and your stories. Think about that. Friendship, intimacy, family, sense of connection, respect, self-esteem, status, recognition, strength, freedom. These can all be subjects of your wonderful storytelling. And of course, self-actualization, desire to become the most one can be. That's what everyone's kind of shooting for. So I wanted to call your attention to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs from a magical standpoint, because you can get a lot out of this and apply it to your magic. All right. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for everyone and all the fifth panelists. We're going to go around to final questions or thoughts. Jonas, go ahead and get us started.
Well, I have a final thought, which is going all about senses. Have you heard of baffling blocks? This is Alan Wan and Ashton Carter's baffling blocks. Talk about engaging the senses. This is a magic trick for your hands. You know, you lift up the 3 blocks, and then you lift up 1 block, and that 1 block is heavier than all 3 put together. Talk about engaging senses. That's baffling blocks by Alan Wan and Ashton Carter. If you're thinking about trying to find ways to engage different senses for your audience, that is certainly one way, because, oh my goodness, even though I know what's going on, it still baffles my senses, and it engages me. I just keep it on my little table here, and every time I walk by, I just pick it up and perform it for myself, and I get tickled pink. It's just so exciting. So I'm engaged with myself.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. Napoleon, final thoughts on engagement.
Yes. Sorry, I don't know if I suddenly vanished for a second, but I'm back. I'm back. So yeah, engagement. Yeah, it's very interesting, because I think, as you said in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that self-actualization at the top of the pyramid, I think it's one that wasn't in Tarbell 20. He talks about health, adventure, money, physiological needs, but power. That's an interesting thing. I just thought I'd add that in. You know, there's power as in terms of domination. There's power in terms of empowerment and wish fulfillment. And so these are other themes that you can add in. But it's funny, I don't think they mentioned that, Michael Amar and Dan Harlan, in Tarbell 20. One thing that I don't think we could talk more about it at some point, but I think structure is a very interesting thing. Tarbell 34, Dan Harlan, they talk about routining a show, and I think structure is a key thing, because, you know, maybe you get engagement at the beginning of the show, but your structure and how you structure your show and the emotional journey of the audience and you as the performer going towards the climax, that's what will keep the audience engaged to the very end. And in terms of things that I thought were interesting, I have a couple of things here. Be More Funny by Christopher T. Magician. His real name's Christopher W. Barnes. He's a fantastic performer, a great theorist. He's I suppose most known for being in the children's magic world, but he is a fantastic thinker and experimenter with magic. And, you know, if you're funny and they're laughing, the audience is listening and they're engaged. I mean, there are good laughs and there are bad laughs, but generally, if the audience are laughing, then they're listening to what you're saying, and it's a very instant response. Whereas, you know, sometimes when you're performing something that's maybe more dramatic, magically, it can be a little harder to know if the audience is fully engaged, unless, of course, they clap at the end of the routine. But you don't necessarily know second to second, moment to moment, how engaged they are. Whereas obviously a comedic magician gets a very quick idea of whether the joke is going over or not. This is another interesting book that Jeff McBride switched me onto. It's Audience Management by Gail Youngberg. I'll put a thing in the chat. That's another one. And this is an interesting book as well. It's by a British magician. I don't think he's so well known over here, the book, but it's called Paths to Enchantment by Malcolm Yaffe. And I think I suppose it's aimed probably at people who are working in the children's world and are creating this element of fantasy in their shows. But I think obviously, you know, adults do not have as much fantasy in their lives and as much escapism as perhaps as children do. And so I think it is part of our job to create that. So a lot of these techniques can be reapplied into adult magic performances. But yeah, I think, again, you know, our job is to be engaging, and however we do it, we just have to go out there and do it to the best of our abilities.
Well said, Napoleon, and thank you for those resources. Chris, how is our fifth panelists doing, chiming in here with their final thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go down the list here. It's great to see that the comments are coming. So first off, I'm not sure if we got this from Michael. Michael, I'm taking away the fact that engagement is so very much more than simply nailing a performance. Engagement is compassionate, empathetic, and sincere. Thanks for your time tonight, guys. Thank you, Michael, for being our fifth panelist. I know we all appreciate it here. And also a big surprise, Braden. Jeff McBride is giving everyone a gift here, this is a wonderful thing. And I encourage you guys, the link is in the comments. Here is a video to look at after the show. It is the talk I did for the Magic and Meaning Maximum Engagement, and then check out that link. So guys, that is a wonderful gift from the one and only Jeff McBride. Thank you, Jeff. And finally, Edward Ruiz, Braden. Edward Ruiz says Jeff McBride's Magic Quest was an amazing show, a great example of visual magic, skill, and personal story that shared strengths and vulnerabilities. Audiences want to cheer for a hero, and they also enjoy the story and journey that created a hero. What a great summary of the show, and also the discussion that we're talking about. And finally, Braden, Heather Meadows, thank you for the great conversation. It was wonderful to see you again, Chris. It is always great to see you, Heather. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you tune in again. Back to you, my friend.
Chris, let's as my final thought, I'd like to acknowledge the Thinking About Magic 500th like, and that goes to, go ahead and pop it up.
Yeah, our 500th Facebook like is going to Olivia T. Vo. What a wonderful, it was great to see that 500th like on our page, Thinking About Magic live stream. So thank you, Olivia, if you're out there, for that great honor.
All right, Chris, I think we're ready to go home for the evening. Yes?
Well, I think it's been a great conversation, an inspiring conversation, Jonas, Napoleon, and also to you, Braden, for putting this whole thing together. So people out there watching, Braden Daniels really formatted this show, and I can't say enough how grateful I am to have him here to inspire the four of us in such a great conversation about engaging our audiences. Napoleon, thank you so much for being on the show. Jonas, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, our fifth panelists out there, thank you for joining us. And you know what? My name is Chris Harness Faust, and
I'm Braden Daniels.
And we encourage you
to keep thinking about magic. Till next time.
Till next time, everyone.